right. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Thank you for joining. You are in the Small Group Instruction Essential Practice 3 Summer Learning Blitz 2022 session. So hopefully you are in the right session. And if not, you are welcome to stay. So Jason and Vanetta are online with me. And they will monitor the chat and as well drop some links in for you when it's time. Make sure that you complete the attendance sheet. Jason has dropped that in the chat. And if you have any questions, we will have a Q&A at the end.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
I have them muted or something?
All right, so I asked if everyone could please mute your devices. And there will be times where you can unmute. So I am Jennifer Snapp. I am the literacy consultant for this session. So again, welcome, welcome, welcome. And if you did not hear me, Vanetta Clark Tools and Jason Psycho, my colleagues, are also online to help with the chat.
Thanks for having us. Welcome, everyone.
Great. All right. So first of all, we're just going to say, hey, we are thinking about the whole child when we think about this session and any session we do here at Wayne Risa. And when we think about the whole child, it's a community. So we think about family engagement, physical environment, the social emotional well-being of children, their health services, as well as academics and everything else. So as you can see in the circle to the side, that's what incorporates the whole child. Can someone please come off mute and read this next slide? Hello?
The promotion of social, emotional, and academic learning is not a shifting educational fad. It is the substance of education itself.
Thank you so much. Because what does that mean to you? What are your thoughts about that? Anyone just feel to come off mic and jump in. Okay, no one?
Well, I would say that it is saying that it's more, it's not just that it's always that their learning has always been tied to the social and emotional, where the kids are socially in their social emotional, where they're at is tied with how well they can learn.
Good. Thank you so much. All right, so again, the whole child is our focus. So this is our agenda for this afternoon because we only have an hour, but we're going to have our working agreements, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the Essential Practice 3. Our purpose, data analysis, and strategic planning for instruction, managing small group instruction strategies, and then we're going to have some reflections, questions, and answers, or I should say some takeaways. All right, so here are our working agreements. Please engage in humble inquiry, commit to being present, including taking care of yourself and our community as needed. Share and harvest knowledge and take a learner's stance. And today's purpose is to ensure educators implement small group instruction and individual instruction using a variety of grouping strategies, most often with flexible groups formed and instruction targeted to children's observed and assessed needs in specific aspects of literacy development. And that comes from Essential Practice 3. So let's start off. What is small group instruction? In your own words, define what small group instruction. Jason is dropping a link in the chat to the Padlet. And so in the first column where it says my definition of SGI, please go ahead and put your words in. Your definition. Take about a minute to do that. Okay, great. So we have Vanetta, do you care to read any of these? I see one says, a set time when a teacher can meet with a group of students to target skills good. Grouping students to better meet individual needs in a group setting. Okay, focus.
Collaboratively working with a small group of students, 1 to 6, guiding and instructing with 6 or less students. Those are
Great.
things that have been placed in the chat.
Okay, great. All right.
Thank you, Crystal and Kim.
Great definitions. Thank you. All right, so here we are. What is small group instruction, or as I like to say, SGI, and why do we do it? It is chunking that tier 1 instruction to make sure that it is more digestible for students who need more support, who needs extra strategies, who need more examples, and of course, time. As teachers, we know that we always ask for more time. If we could squeeze 24 more hours in our school day, it would be great without actually adding any more hours. So why do we group students? Well, one, we want to target their observed and assessed needs and literacy development. We want to be able to reflect and to help them develop and grow in their reading comprehension, their vocabulary, as well as their fluency. We also want to assess and help them to explore and engage in rich, complex texts. And we want to give them those increased opportunities for purposeful reading. And they also need to have choice. So that means that we need to have some great libraries in our classrooms. We want our students to be able to know and care. We want to be able to know them. That means we have to build a rapport with them, but we also want them to know that we care about them and they need to care about themselves, others, and the world around them. And we also want to evoke this critical thinking and intellectual curiosity and joy when students are reading and when they are writing. And we can do all of this through small group instruction. So, essential practice 3. Here, if you look, and of course, Jason's going to drop the links in for essential practice 3, but it's small group and individual instruction using a variety of grouping strategies, most often with flexible groups formed and instruction targeted to children's observed and assessed needs and specific aspects of literacy development. So just look at the screen for a minute. This is for K3, and just feel free to come off mic. And what speaks to you in the bulleted areas? What speaks to you?
So explicit instruction as needed in word recognition strategies stands right out to me.
Okay, all right. Anyone else?
I think
Repeated
it's
reading,
Can you say that one more time?
repeated reading stands out.
Oh, why is that?
I don't think it's done enough. And each time the students read the same passage, they will get more out of it and they will have a deeper understanding and they can have better conversations about what they've read if they really have a deeper meaning of what it means.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham, for adding that. Okay, anyone else?
I have a question.
Yes.
It says that it's deliberate in providing quality instruction to children in all groups. It's for those children who are struggling, but is it not also for those children who need to be challenged?
Yes, it's for all students. Remember in the beginning, we said that it's just chunking that tier 1 instruction because we always want to begin with tier 1, which is teaching all of our students. And when we think of that tier 2 and that tier 3, that's when we began to break it down even more. So students who fall in the tier 2 category, they need extra support. And then those students who fall in tier 3, we know that we need to it needs to be more intense. So thank you for bringing that up, Jeanette.
Yes.
Thank you.
well,
So we have Samantha in the chat who says comprehension strategies. And Jamie said coaches children as they engage in reading and writing, and that the students have an activity to role play in learning and not just teacher instruction. So they're using the most of their actual time reading and writing. And that was from Emily. And then Denise said that the bolded terms speak to me: fluency, word recognition strategies, text structure, comprehension, and writing strategies. These stand out because they are transferable skills that can be applied in all content areas.
Yes. Yes, that is great. I like to have engaging sessions because I don't want to do all the talking, because as educators, we always know the person who talks the most is the one who is learning the most. So thank you so much for chiming in and adding to the chat. So let's look at for grades 4 and 5. It's still the same thing. We still focus on small group instruction using that variety of grouping strategies. So look at the bulleted points and what sticks out to you, what pops out to you.
I think it's the supports the small group discussion. A lot of times the way that I was using it with going over something they did independently, they come together, they talk about what answers they know are incorrect, how they can eliminate choices because they're looking back at the text. They have to give details from what they've been reading. And I think that that's pretty powerful as a formative assessment because you get an idea right away of the students that got it and they can do it independently or those that still need more support.
Yes, yes, Jeanette, thank you. That's great. I heard you say something like, I think when you have the students looking at the pages on the text, but it also forces them to look at all the text features, because sometimes our students read and they may look at the pictures for a moment, but they actually may not pay attention to the captions on the page. So it forces them to go back into the text. So thank you for lifting that.
Jamie and Kim said in the chat that cooperative and collaborative learning with students' peers is a huge part of this. And then Frania said, provides opportunities for students to plan, draft, revise, and edit writing together. They have the teacher to help them, but because they may also be together in the same level groups, they can help each other and learn from each other. That's so critically important because we want our students to be connecting with one another, building relationships with one another, and absolutely learning with and alongside one another. Finally, Kelsey says, goal focus and utilize. So goal focused, meaning helping students to set goals and utilizing conferences so students have ownership of their learning and the pathway towards success.
Yes, love it. Students definitely must take ownership. And I love that you lifted prior to that students need to work together. They must collaborate in order to help one another, because a lot of times we know that sometimes students just don't understand when the teacher is explaining. So their peers help a lot. Thank you so much.
I just want to add one more thing.
Sure.
And this is from Dina. Dina is talking about the fact that the students together, because they're on the same level in terms of age and experience, that they really have the opportunity to broaden each other's perspective and connect to world scenarios and world views in a way that makes sense to them. And then we've got folks who agree with Dina. And they're talking about paired reading is essential for students also in helping them to share ideas and to scaffold their learning.
Absolutely. Students connect with one another because they share their lived experiences. So great points. Thank you, Dina, for lifting that in the chat. All right, so what I want to do right now, let's take about 3 minutes to reflect and respond on the Padlet. Why and how do you group your students? I know that some people already started, so we will be in column 2. So let's take about 3 minutes. I'll set my timer. Okay, to tackle similar needs and using multiple. Using multiple data pieces, great. Group them, yes. I love the multiple data pieces. Okay, yes, grouping students based on their strengths or areas of struggle. I'm glad that you lived. I don't know who put that in, but it's so important that we group students based on their strengths and not just their challenges. And I think sometimes we focus too much on the challenges. Tackle similar needs, absolutely. Yes, using the data from NWEA, DRA's observation, yes. The observation, those informal checks for understanding, great. Your data form, diagnostic tests, excellent. Academic struggles, yes. Okay, focusing on certain skills and objectives, reading goals, excellent. give students what they need, and teachers can group students based on their level or by using a pretest given before teaching a new skill. I love that, because when we talk about that pretest, sometimes I think about instructional learning cycles. So like every 4 to 6 weeks, you want to check in, how have students grown? And that gives you a better temperature of how they're going to do by the end of the year. So thank you for lifting that. Based on goals, okay. Common goals, areas of struggle. All right, so I think we're all saying the same thing. I see a lot of areas of struggle. Vanetta, do you see the same thing I'm seeing?
I am seeing that as a theme. And when we think about areas of struggle, I think it's important for us to look at that from an asset-based
Yes.
an asset-based lens, because even though students may have academic struggle, there's also the opportunity for productive struggle, right? And so it's important for students to have the opportunity to work through the things that challenge them, and looking at what they already know that adds to their ability to be more independent, more in control of their learning, more autonomous, and more reflective, because they can begin to put those pieces of learning together based on what they know and what they have yet to learn.
Right. That's why I think it's great. This one comment, and I'm gonna read it again. So to make sure everyone in the group hears, I group students based on their strengths or areas of struggle. This helps me target a specific need or offer enrichment opportunities. And I think sometimes we've, kind of forget, like, the student is doing good. We just need to give them more enrichment. And think about that with your tier 1 students, those who don't need that much help. Because sometimes when we don't go back to them and enrich their learning, they tend to regress. And we want to make sure all of our students are progressing. So again, whoever put that onto the Padlet, thank you so much. All right, does anyone have any questions? 1 minute. What questions might you have? Okay. All right, great. All right, so let's look at strategic planning for instruction. Again, I love for people to come off the mic. So could someone come off and read the first question? What data?
What data do you use and what do you do with the data? How is data used to drive your instruction? How do you plan for small groups?
All right. So again, we're going to use the Padlet. I want you to take 1 minute to just let that sink in, and then go to the Padlet and begin putting in your responses. As you're thinking, remember, think about all the data that you use in your classroom, because we just don't focus on our standardized tests. Great. As a special education teacher, I'm constantly progress monitoring. Yes, this allows my groups to be fluid and focus on what they need at that moment in time to meet their IEP goals. Excellent. Love it. Can we use running records? I haven't heard that in a long time, to determine a baseline reading level for students. Excellent. Yeah, the data can be used to plan individual instruction during daily activities. Yes. When using the data, it tells us what they have mastered and what they still need to work on in order to, yes, be at grade level. I like that you said in order to be at grade level, because when we think of small group instruction, oftentimes some educators think that small group instruction is, how can I say it, breaking down the lessons or taken away so that they are at a lower grade level. And we want to make sure that we're teaching on grade level in tier 1. And when you're doing tier 2 and tier 3, you're providing more support, but you're still focusing on the context or the skills that you were teaching in tier 1. So thank you for lifting that. Great.
Jen, this is Vanetta. I also look at small group instruction as a time for acceleration because we have lots of students who are on grade level. And this is an opportunity for us to get them together and to have them be in a space where they can move ahead and continue to advance in their learning.
Yes, that's what I was saying in a couple slides before. It's making sure that, we also focus in small groups. We focus on those students who fall in that tier 1 category because we want to enrich their learning as well so that they don't regress. So yes, thank you for iterating that again. Okay, small group discussion helps identify areas for reteaching or enrichment. Yes, BAS and iReady are also used. Great. Okay. When we use iReady data, the test group students by levels and identifies areas students need work in. I also use in-class observations for data. Who put that into the Padlet? Can you talk more about your observations? What type of observations are you using?
You mean anecdotal?
What else?
Okay, well, I work with I work in kindergarten. So what I do is I see basically how they use strategies and action. So it's just like I do a daily 5 session. So if they're on the floor, I see if they are looking at the book the correct way and following, print concepts and stuff like that. And then I take note, and then we go by that.
Okay, great. Jason, I just thought about it. Did you hit the record button? Because I did not.
Yes, I did.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Jamie. Would anyone else like to share on the mic a strategy that you may use on how you plan for instruction using your data? If you did not put it on the Padlet.
Jennifer, this is Annette. For the observations, I like to watch the kids throughout the day, even outside of my small group. So a lot of mine is based on the data I collect from the iReady and from running records. But I also like to watch them in other situations outside of reading and writing. And it helps me to develop stronger groups, I think, because I can see which kids never interact with the other kids. And
Yes.
and sometimes I actually mix the groups on purpose. So my stronger kids are partnering with the less capable kids. And it just seems to make, it just seems to make everyone happy. Everyone can be successful when they're working with someone. And kids love to teach kids. And I mean, I'm always around. I don't leave and get, have a break while they're teaching each other. But it's just, I don't know. I think there's so many observations that go on in the classroom. Morning meeting time, recess. It just gives you a real good feel for the whole student, not just how they're doing in reading and writing.
Yes, I totally agree. That's what we talk about, that flexible grouping, because it allows students, to see who has things that are in common. I might like dogs, you may like ponies, just for example. So yes, what are their interests? That is great, Annette. Do you keep a clipboard or do you do everything mentally? How do you record your observations?
I am mentally
good,
crazy, but no, I do it. I do a lot of notes. I do a lot of Post-it notes. I use a lot of return labels, actually address labels, and I just put the child's name on that and then stick it on like a master sheet of each child so I can refer back to it. There's many different ways to do it, but I could not depend just on my brain because I have too much going on. There's no way. I have to write everything down. So I have a lot of notes, a lot of Post-it notes, and
that's cool. That's cool.
And that said it the best way. That's kind of exactly what I do. I just couldn't verbalize it. So in that, I do the Post-it notes. I have a folder for each child and it's all a mess. I'm writing in it, on it, around it. So yeah, basically in that, I do kind of the same thing.
Yes.
Can I jump in just real quick?
Absolutely, Crystal. Thank you.
I do notice too when you group kids together, or you kind of see who works well together. So therefore, because I know I have 5th graders and they can be really picky, but but as I'm monitoring them, I see, okay, well, maybe these two kids aren't going to do very well. So I'm not going to put those together in a group because they're not bringing out the best in each other, really trying to, advance each other, if I can say it like that. So it does give me an opportunity to see who I can put with whom so that everybody benefits.
Exactly. I love that, Crystal. Thank you so much. A lot of times if we're observing students on the playground, during recess or lunchtime, you see who vibes together. And if they play together well, they may very well work together good in the classroom. So good observations. Thank you so much, Crystal and Jamie and Annette. Vanetta, I see that your hand is raised.
It is. I just wanted to add to what Crystal said. Oh my gosh, hold on 1 second. I didn't write it down. As far as grouping the kids with different capabilities or abilities, what's really cool is seeing that the kids who might not be really strong in reading in a small math group might excel. And all my kids become the professional. It's like, oh, go see, if we're using an app on the iPad, go see Joe over there because Joe is the expert on that. And oh, I don't remember how to get into Go Epic. You go get so-and-so. And so the kids look at each other and say, hey, this is a person I need to go to, and they work it out together. It's more of a collaborative learning when I'm using those notes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, I see 3 hands raised. However, I cannot see your names. I'm a little blinded today. Vanetta, can you call on those participants?
Absolutely. So we'll start with Jamie, and then we'll go to Emily, and then I'll add my 2 cents.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vanetta.
Okay, I find when you do a grouping of all abilities, that sometimes your quiet students will do better in a smaller setting, and then you have the ones who are more helpful. And I find that that's a good thing, because sometimes we have kids who are so afraid to make a mistake in front of the whole class that they do better in a small group.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Jamie.
Emily?
Okay. Hi. So I wrote this in the chat a couple minutes ago. I'm pretty new to elementary school and to teaching reading and writing. And I'm just wondering, this is a question for everybody, what your favorite resources are for coming up with activities for the kids to do while you're working with them in small groups. I'm not really sure where to start with that.
Okay.
Well, that kind of dovetails my comment, Jen. So if you don't mind, I'll jump in really quickly and then get out of the way. So one of the things that I was thinking as I was listening to you all talk about the ways that you group your students, before you begin content, those first few weeks of school are critical for relationship building. And so you give your students the opportunity to get to know one another, to get to know you, you get to know them. And then that makes it a lot easier to get students working together to understand who's oil and water, but also to know what students' interests are and to really help them engage in the literacy practices as, a functioning group, because you all know each other so well. And so then it's easier to do some of the groupings. And so, Emily, when you think about the practices and the activities that you will use with your students, I think you really want to begin with some getting to know you things, building relationship and rapport among your students. And I will drop a few resources in the chat.
So Vanetta, before you drop anything in the chat, I want to do this because I'm going to add a new columns, because I want everyone to be able to take the Padlet and use it later for resources. So I'm going to say best practice strategies and resources and activities. And then we can just add to that column.
So add to the Padlet, absolutely.
Yes, and we can do that throughout. So thank you so much. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. I want you to think about this. So when you're using data to inform instruction and group students, I know, like, I forgot who said it, but when you think about your anecdotal notes, sometimes if you just pull up a chair and sit next to a small group of students that you may not be working with at the time, and just listening into that conversation and seeing how the things that they are taking or saying, what are they taking away? What do they understand? What don't they understand? Skim through their journals when they're at lunchtime, read perhaps what some of their goals are that they may not have shared with you or the whole group. Review their performance task, go through it and see what didn't they get? What do they need more support with? What are some of their self-reflections in their journals? If your students don't journal, that might be a way to get them, start journaling and just tell them, write whatever is on your mind. How do you feel about today's lesson? Have them reflect, just like as educators, we reflect on how our lessons go. Ask the students at the end of the day, take the last 5 minutes before the end of the day and tell them to write their reflections for today. And then go back and look at those reflections, and that will give you a lot of information as well. That's another form of data collection. Okay, so looking at some of the bullets on this point, this slide, what pops out at you, if anything at all? I know a lot of it we've already talked about. Looking at their journal entry, give you more insight into how they're thinking, what they know and what they do not know. And it'll tell you who's mostly disconnected and who is connected.
Hi,
So
I want to add
okay,
something really quick. I'm actually not on the computer. I'm using my phone, so it's really hard for me to navigate, but I'm listening.
okay.
I did want to point out, for me, I teach young kindergarten. So these are the little guys that didn't quite make the cutoff for kindergarten, but we teach a kindergarten curriculum. What pops out to me a lot is what I do a lot is the teacher created quizzes. And this is because they're only 5 years old. And a lot of things, they're just learning their alphabet, their numbers, how to act, everything. So if I'm teaching a lesson in math, for instance, and I'm getting some scores that aren't coming back to where I'm like, what did I do? Or how can I fix it? I will go, and when I'm correcting the pages, I will create my own with some pictures and something that pops at them, little cartoons. And see what it was. Was it something I did, or how can I go back? And I can specify what exactly they're missing. And then when I do that, I find that when I reteach the lesson, it's 100%. So that's what I just wanted to let you guys know.
That is great, Dawn. Thank you for sharing. That makes a lot of sense, because your students, right? The people who create the tests, they don't always know your students. So sometimes, you just want to dig a little deeper. So that's great. Would anyone else care to add anything? Okay. This next slide I added because this is something that is near and dear to my heart. Avoid pigeonholing. Use flexible grouping whenever you can. I'm sure you can raise your hands, just think about it. How many of your colleagues have you come across who keep students in the same group the whole year or almost the entire year? How can students grow if we keep them in the same group all year? So we have to move them around. When we keep them in one group or the same level-based group all year or most of the year, it creates this negative self-perception. Students are very smart. They observe and they say, oh, I must not be that smart. And so they begin to regress. Sometimes, they don't feel a part. They feel disconnected. We want to make sure that our students are showing progression throughout the year, and it's okay for them to grapple with grade level text. Too often, we don't want our students to struggle, but it's good for them to struggle. It's a good struggle. We don't want them to be in tears, but we do want them to, kind of try and figure things out on their own before we jump in and give them the answers. And again, I cannot overstress this, but make sure that we are teaching on grade level on grade level for all tiers, and then just making sure we provide that additional support and those additional strategies, additional time when we're working with students that fall into the tier 2 and tier 3 categories, because that's where we're chunking that information for them. Creatively switch out those groups on a regular basis. You may do it every week, you may do it every 2 weeks, and sometimes you may kind of stretch it and you may do like a series where you they might stay in a group for 4 weeks. It depends on your age group and it depends on your students, but we want to make sure that we're adding joy and that we're maintaining a high interest in those flexible groups. And it's okay to do gender groups. Sometimes, you know, especially say if you're talking about sports or if you're talking about something that boys really like to talk about, you may create a group that's a small group of boys or a small group of girls. It just depends. What might you have to add to this slide? Dina, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. I just have a question too. When you're talking about grouping, one of the things that stuck out most to me was having my students self-reflect and analyzing their goals, whether they're meeting their goals or not. And I just wanted to know if there's any other educator out there that puts their kiddos into like a small group to discuss their self-analysis of any of their work performance, whether that's a written response, a more formal summative assessment, a project, or maybe it's just from in your small guided reading groups, just having them discuss what their areas of strength of their understanding or their areas of improvement are. And if you have had kiddos that are collaborating or not collaborating, but sharing out loud to others, do you find it highly beneficial?
Okay. Does anyone have any ideas for Dina or about what you do with your students? You can add it in the chat.
I also, hi, my name is Denise.
Hi, Denise.
I have taken a grouping for instructional purposes, and they have a book according to their reading level. And then they do a book project at the end, and they do the story elements, and we analyze the character, and I teach 4th grade. So they really have a good time with that. They make a poster board, or they create their project together in the classroom. And so it's not an outside thing for the parents to have to work on.
Great, great. That's good.
So Rachel is asking, or Rochelle, when teaching grade level material for tier 2 and 3 students, could you provide some examples, or for students who require tier 2 and 3 services or supports?
Yeah, that's a good question. So say, for example, you're teaching, we're just going to say the main idea. So you want to do the main idea as an overall lesson for your tier 1, that's all your students. And then when you get to tier 2, you may want to, you can still take like maybe use a text set, a story that, or, you know, a book that may not be that big, maybe a very short book, say if you're doing K2, a decodable book, but you want to focus on main idea. Okay, and so you're going to work on main idea for that specific group, but just using a text that may not be as complicated, but still grade level. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And where can I find additional resources that will support what you're telling me?
So there is a book that I use. It's called What Are You Grouping For? How to Guide Small Groups Based on Readers. And this is by Julie Wright and Barry Hunan.
Could you put that in a text for me?
What I will do, I will at the end, I will put it in on the Padlet under the resources column.
Perfect. Thank you.
You are most welcome. What other questions might you have? We have about 16 more minutes.
I guess I have a question too, because
Yes.
trying to, deal with behaviors when you're working with a small group and making sure the other students are busy at work, that's where I have the difficult time with, because sometimes I'm stopping and redirecting other students in the classroom. I have to say it was much easier doing it online, doing your grouping, because you didn't have that. But in the classroom, it's more difficult for me. And then I was wondering, with me grouping, like I just said, is that okay for me to do that? Like they share a book, you know what I mean? That they choose a book toward their reading level. Like I have a group of students that they're reading at a second grade reading level. They have 3 books that they can choose from. Is that okay to do?
It's okay to do. I think when you're in a small group, I know I said that you want to make sure that you're teaching at, grade level, but when you have that choice piece, when students are reading, because you want to make sure that they are reading, and then when you add that joy piece, so you might have a group where this is a choice reading group, and so you want to have those books in your classroom library for them, and yes, they can partner read because they're still reading. Excuse me. So yes, that's okay to do that.
I have that same issue that this young lady just stressed out about. When you're working in a small group and other students are constantly coming to you for assistance, or they finish what you gave them. So I ran into that a lot. So what I did start doing was I would put certain groups or certain students in on technology and go to some app there. And then the other ones that I knew that wouldn't need me as much, I may group them in partner read, because they love to partner read. And that kind of helped me stay focused on the small groups that I was helping. But if anybody has any other ideas, I will greatly appreciate it.
Yeah,
I do actually.
Oh, cool.
I was just going to share, if you have the ability to create listening centers in your classroom, there are lots of books that are on YouTube that are illustrated. You can have students listen to books that are being read aloud. I would even venture to redirect students. You say like, oh, I'm done with my work. So anchor charts are really good. Or classroom desk maps that say what to do when you're done. And so what to do when you're done, you give them like 5 activities. And if you put that as an anchor chart on the wall, or if you put that, on each student's desk, then they know that there are other things that they can do to take advantage and to own their own learning while you're working in those small groups. So boredom should never be an option. When I was a kid, I could never tell my mom I was bored, because at the very minimum, the appropriate response is go get another book. Once you're done with the book or the task that is at hand, you send them to go and get more books. If you got to read all day until we come back to the whole group. And for students who are, might have some attention issues and they're not able to stay focused, again, that's where that what to do next chart comes into place. So maybe they draw a picture, maybe they write about what they read, maybe they, write a poem. Like, you have to give students options to find joy in their learning and to really impress upon them that they are responsible for your learning. You're there to facilitate that learning. You're there to help them grow, but ultimately they are responsible for their learning. And so I'm going to read Chelsea's response because it ties directly to this and it's excellent.
Great, thank you.
You need to establish expectations and routines before really starting small groups. In the beginning, you want to do rounds, coming back together between rounds. What went well? What do we need to improve on? Until students are able to follow expectations, they are assigned specific stations, and then I gradually release into choice. So again, variety, variety, variety. The more planned and prepared you are, the much better your small group instruction will go. You have to have exhaustive resources for the students beforehand. And then that way you redirect them. Go to your anchor chart or go to your what do I do next chart. and pick an activity. And until they have exhausted every activity, which isn't going to happen, you want to continue to set that expectation and practice, practice, practice. You got to be patient with your babies because they're.
I don't know what happened to Vanetta.
Nothing, I stopped.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay. All right. I'm like, what happened? All right. Another thing that you can do, you want to be intentional about planning out, maybe not just a week, but maybe 2 weeks in advance. Like, how are these small groups going to coincide with your overall lesson, your tier 1 lesson? So you want to make sure that in your small groups, you're scaffolding that information because you want to build on student learning so that when you come back to tier 1 instruction, that they are able to join into the conversation and they have some meaning there. Also, I mentioned earlier that you want to find perhaps text sets, which are books that are not as complex or not as long as the book that you're using in your tier 1 instruction, and that will help students as well. When you're working with small groups, all your students don't have to be in small groups at the same time. So perhaps you can do your tier 1 instruction and then you give them an assignment to do. And then you may take 10 minutes and work with a small group, and which means that you can just roll your chair, or, take your chair and sit next to them and work with that particular group. So we have to be creative in how we work with our students in small groups. So think about it that way. You can do maybe an intense 2 weeks for a particular group of students. So there are multiple ways that you can do small group instruction. But the key is making sure that the work is scaffolding so that it makes sense to students. It's not, when we think of small group instruction, it should not be just giving them busy work to keep them busy while you're working with another group. It has to be meaningful and purposeful to the overall instruction.
Yeah, so Denise Jones from the chat, I think we got at least 2 Denises here. I had my 5th graders working on boom card decks with skills that we had already used as an extension if they finished earlier. This worked wonderfully for Greek and Latin roots. If you have access to Orton Gillingham, you may know that there are some exercises that are already available for you there. I also had a bin of books that had graphic organizers for them to apply what they had learned. I was assessing if they could choose the correct graphic organizer and explain their choice. If students wanted to read a book of choice, I would have them summarize what they'd read.
Okay.
Thank you, Denise. So more skills that we're trying to provide, or I should say strategies and activities to help you all when you feel like you're grappling to keep your students engaged while you're working with other small groups.
And I want to also, thank you, Vanetta. Thank you, Denise. I want to go back and I want to talk about modeling as well. When we think about the beginning of the year and we begin our small groups, if you're going to do small groups with your entire class, then you want to do some modeling. So have students like role play how we're going to do the small groups in weeks 1 and 2 of the school year to get them used to that routine if you're going to incorporate that into your classes. And also model with them, sit down and say, okay, so we're going to role play small group instruction. I'm going to work with this group right here. And so this is what I need you all to do, and give them the rules, the procedures. You can also use cups like red, green, and yellow cups, or some type of markers where if it's something that they are really, really struggling with, that they can put a red cup out to say, hey, this is intense. I need your help. And then they'll know ahead of time when you get a break that you will go and meet with them before you go to the next group. Or I've seen in classrooms where, you have the little push lights. You get them from a dollar store. If a student is struggling and they've already asked someone that they're in their group, or if you have a student in another group who can help them but can't at the time, they can press their button. And when you see that light on, then you'll know before you transition to another group that that student needs your help. So those are just some ideas for management. All right, now here, these are some steps for planning. Create a weekly calendar plan. I know all of us don't have enough time, but think about it. Planning is key, because if you have it planned out already, you know what you're going to do. At least you have an idea. Outline any scheduling implications, things that may be going on in your building. You know how something always comes up. You may have some type of a meeting that for the students. Plan the days that you're going to access your students' knowledge. And then again, plan your whole group instruction and anticipate the outcomes such as mini lessons, mentor texts, and models, shared reading and writing experiences that are harnessed together. And what are your students' work productions? What are their creations? And then have your students share out. And then when you're planning for small group learning opportunities, think about the strategies that you're going to use, the time that you're going to need to work with those small groups, and who are you going to work with, and what technology will be used. Jason is our instructional technology consultant, and I'm sure he has some wonderful ideas. Jason, would you care to chime in?
Sure. I think one of the things that you want to consider is, as you said, like have a plan, but also have the tools in mind. And anytime you're trying to enhance any of the stuff with technology, you want to make sure that you're using it with purpose and not just using technology for technology's sake. So there are plenty of tools for doing that. There are plenty of tools that enable you to really enhance this and do the record keeping and the data and analysis and those types of things. The conversations you want to have with your colleagues to make sure you're all using the same tools and make sure that you're one, not just kind of going off and kind of finding the free stuff because it's free. It's always good to try stuff out and have those conversations. But also, if you get a large number of teachers in your building using the similar tools and similar technologies, then you can make a case for a district purchase of an enterprise or a pro license for that tool.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Also thinking about that, like, for example, Jason said, you want to use technology as a tool. It has to be meaningful. So if you're working with writing in your small group and you want a group of students to write a book, it doesn't have to be a long book, but they can write write a book using technology. It doesn't always have to be on, with pencil and paper. And then they can incorporate graphics. They can work collaboratively doing that. And then you get a finished product.
Yeah. And on top of that, you could start small in the early grades. You can write a book with Google Slides or PowerPoint. That's a book. If you have slides, you could format it to look like a book. You can add your graphics. You can create themes there. The pages all look similar and template it out for your students. If you want to use something a little more advanced, there's a tool called Book Creator, and that's at the other extreme. And so, again, don't be intimidated by these things. The instructional strategy should drive the tool selection. So if you think that, hey, you know what, Book Creator has some really great features that I like and are meaningful to the instructional experience, then by all means do that. If you're still kind of dipping your toes in the water, PowerPoint and Google Slides work just as well.
Yes.
And when you're using those resources, text to speech is incredible, because oftentimes our students, like I said before, their listening comprehension is a lot higher than their reading comprehension. And so their vocabulary is probably more advanced than their ability to write. And so when they employ text to speech, they're able to see their words on the screen and make the connection between speaking and writing and reading.
In addition, any tool that has immersive reader, that has the tools that are necessary to adjust lexile level or highlight or block off words to allow students to focus are as well as any translation tools that are available. A lot of immersive reader tools and even Google Translate do very well for Spanish, but they're also expanding into other languages as well that do an excellent job of not only translating, but also doing text to speech.
Yes, great. And also think about, other forms of writing. It just doesn't have to be a book. They can create brochures. So it's a lot of things that we can do with technology and with the graphics that are available now. Children would have so much fun. and they're still writing. And then you can have them get up and present when you're thinking about small group instruction. Also think about readers theater. Young children and our older children, they love to do that. They like to perform. So get theatrical, bring in, you know, some curtains and a microphone, and give them a spotlight, and then, you know, have them create something collaboratively, and then get up and perform on Friday, or give them 2 weeks. So it's a lot of things that you can do, different strategies for small group instruction, but make sure that it aligns with your overall tier 1 instruction. Okay, and again, I think someone else said it in the chat, make sure that you clarify your expectations. Give students a rubric and explain it, model it for them, make sure that they understand. We have to be very concise with our explanations. All right, small group instruction strategies. Remember, we want to group scholars based on their interests. So if you have 4 students that are highly interested in dogs, then put them in that group. And you want to say, you know, this is the animal group. I don't know how you want to give it a particular name. What perceptions do we make about our scholars' reading levels? Sometimes we assume that, you know, they don't do good on the pretest, that they just can't read. Maybe they didn't test well. So that's why it's good to make those anecdotal notes. That's why it's good to pull up a seat and listen to your students talk amongst themselves, so you can get a better idea. And what do they need most? Pair your students. It's okay. And pair them with different students. Don't always pair the same 2 students. And then randomly pair students into groups, or put students into groups. Use the wheel. And implement with intentionality. That is so, so important, that when you're doing your small group instruction, that you are intentional about what you're doing and how you're doing it, which is your methodology for that. All right, strategies for SGI for K-3. Can someone come off mic and read the bullets here?
I'll go ahead and read.
Thank you.
Provide explicit instruction with clear expectations. Use time to ensure students can build reading and writing stamina. Monitor reading for meaning, letters and groups of letters and words, and rereading. Build fluency with repeated reading, echo reading, paired and partner reading. Explicit instruction with word recognition, decoding, text structure, reading and writing comprehension. All learning should have purposeful meaning for all students.
Thank you, Dina. And can I have a person read the 4, 5 bullets, the strategies for 4, 5?
Provide explicit instruction with clear expectations. Use time to ensure students build their reading and writing stamina. Partner reading to establish fluency. Have students draw on their own knowledge, instructional conversations, and literature circles. Foster strategic reading and knowledge building with cooperative and collaborative learning, reciprocal teaching, and collaborative strategic reading. Students can collaboratively plan, draft, and revise and/or edit their writing.
Thank you, Dina and Vanetta. All right. And managing small group instruction, remember, we want to teach with equity so all students have an opportunity to learn and succeed. Create a weekly calendar that identifies your time, the opportunities, and group participants, and the foci for each group. Plan and ensure that there is enough time, because we know time is not always on our side and we run out. And meet often with your students who show little evidence of understanding learning targets. And move students according to mastery of knowledge. So when they get it, move them on to another group. Always do your flexible grouping and don't pigeonhole your students. All right, reflections, takeaways, commitments, and questions. So I would like for you to take a moment to reflect on today's learning And it was a engaging session. So I thank those of you who chimed in, whether you did it on the Padlet, in the chat, or you came off mic. What are 3 takeaways from today's session that you will commit to implementing and sustaining in your instructional practice this upcoming school year? What are 2 strategies that you use currently, but will commit to doing daily? What is 1 question you have about small group instruction? Please take the last 5 minutes to reflect and respond on the Padlet. All right, I see people have already started. Great. Grouping students in a variety of ways. These are 3 takeaways. Self-reflections using a variety of types of data. Thank you. Avoid keeping students in the same group all year. Yes. Use various forms of data. Avoid pigeonholing. Great. Changing grouping regularly. Use multiple forms of data to drive groups. Strategies to use. Yes. Okay. Yes, work with tier 1 students to be sure they receive instruction needed to grow at their grade level. Also meeting with the struggling students to address their needs. Using peer-to-peer collaborative learning opportunities. Love the best practice strategies, resources, and the Padlet for small group planning. Remember to use flexible grouping. Yes, to avoid pigeonholing. Great ideas. I love your takeaways. Flexible grouping, multiple sources, establish routines. Change up my groups regularly, give students time to reflect, yes. Focus on strengths and not just deficit areas. Wonderful, wonderful. And please don't forget, if you have a best practice strategy or resource or activity for your colleagues online, please fill out that last column. And thank you for your commitments. I will create engaging centers like listening centers, what to do, anchor chart, great. And use the resources from today. Thank you. Changing my groups more often and having students help each other within the groups. Great. Commit to flexible grouping, strategies by strengths and struggles, yes. Establish expectations and routines before starting small groups, great. Use small groups for all subjects, absolutely, not just reading. Because we should be using small groups in every content area because they're still learning. Teach grade level material, thank you, but provide additional support in small groups for those that need it. Excellent. Trying to be intentional and creative with groupings and honoring student reflections, love it. Providing reading and writing every day, yes. Great. And thank you for those of you who are putting in the names of authors for your strategies. Okay, good. Thank you for whoever put in, what are you grouping for? Thank you so much. Excellent. And Jason and Vanetta, do you have anything to add?
I just want to encourage everyone to have an asset-based lens and approach to teaching their students. You read it off of the Padlet, Jen. Somebody said focusing more on assets than struggles, or more on areas of strength and areas of weakness. And so we have to see our learners as they can be, not where they are. All learning is yet. They are yet to learn what they already do not know.
Yes, Jason.
I think just kind of echoing what I said earlier about any applications of technology that assist you is really just think critically about whether or not it's you're doing it for technology's sake or you have a strategic outcome for its use.
And while Jason just finished, I was just thinking also, especially for your students who are like 3rd grade and the 2nd grade can do it, and perhaps even 1st grade and kindergarten, using applications such as Padlet or Jamboard, and have your students put their ideas there because they're still writing. They're using technology to write, and it's immediate feedback that you can give them, because you can also add to the Padlet or the Jamboard within their group. So you can give them, a page for each group. So again, be innovative about your instruction and how you want to break your small groups down into instruction and the strategies that you're going to use. So I'm going to stop here, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who came on, who contribute to the Padlet in the chat, came off mic. Continue to add to this Padlet. You have access to it, so you can go back to it anytime. And you can add ideas, take ideas away from it, however you want to do it. And if you like this session and you would like to have another one, please send, you can add that to the Padlet too. You can send me an email. I thank you. And then we can come up with something different, like a part 2. So I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, and please take care of yourself. And remember to always give yourself grace as you give your students grace. Have a good evening.